The Assyrian Empire, the hammer of antiquity.
Imagine walking along the banks of the Tigris River over 3,000 years ago. The sun beats down on the plains of Mesopotamia, and in the distance, a fortified city looms. It's no ordinary city. It's Ashur, the birthplace of one of the most feared civilizations of antiquity, the Assyrians. A people born surrounded by adversity, they learned to survive through war. But how did a seemingly isolated people, lacking many natural resources, build one of the most vast and cruel empires in ancient history? And why did it fall with the same brutality with which it dominated the world? Today, we'll delve into the saga of the Assyrian Empire, the hammer of Mesopotamia, the warlords who changed the course of history with blood, fire, and a frightening dose of efficiency. The Assyrians emerged around 2500 BC in northern Mesopotamia, a region that today corresponds to northern Iraq. Unlike the Babylonians, who lived in more fertile areas of the south, the Assyrians inhabited a mountainous region less plentiful in natural resources. This required something essential for their survival: resilience. The city of Ashur, which would give the people their name, became their initial sacred and political center. The Assyrians were surrounded by rival peoples and faced constant threats. To avoid being devoured, they became predators. Forged in the harsh terrain and daily contact with conflict, the warrior spirit was shaped not by choice, but by necessity. Over the centuries, while other Sumerian cities flourished, the Assyrians watched and learned. Gradually, they formed their own identity: fierce, disciplined, and above all, determined to survive. For centuries, the Assyrians lived under the rule of other powers, such as the Akkadians and the Babylonians. But in the 14th century BC, everything began to change. A new kind of king took the throne, a king of strength and courage, Ashurbanipal I, who defied Babylon and declared independence for the Assyrian people. Thus, the First Assyrian Empire was born. From then on, they began a journey of expansion marked by relentless military campaigns, monumental construction, and a war machine that would leave a trail of destruction in its wake. But the secret to Assyrian success was not just brute force. It was organization. They created one of the first professional armed forces in history. The soldiers were not merely peasants conscripted in times of war. They were trained warriors, equipped with iron weapons, shields, cavalry, archers, and even chariots. What's more, the Assyrians pioneered the use of military engineering. They used mobile towers, battering rams, pontoon bridges, and innovative siege techniques to conquer fortified cities. It was modern warfare in ancient times, the empire of fear, strategy, and psychology. Unlike many empires that sought to win hearts and minds, the Assyrians relied on psychological terror as a tool of domination. The palaces of Nineveh and Nimrud in the ancient Assyrian Empire were notorious for their elaborate wall reliefs, often carved in alabaster. These reliefs, depicted in low relief, depicted scenes of battles, hunts, and the life of the royal court, serving as propaganda for the empire's power and glory. Prisoners impaled, mass beheadings, entire populations being deported. These images were not just records, they were messages and propaganda calculated to make enemies surrender before even fighting. Brutality was not a diversion, it was policy. And it worked. Entire peoples opened the gates of their cities to the Assyrian army, preferring submission to massacre. Furthermore, the Assyrians developed a highly efficient system of imperial administration. After conquering a region, they installed local governors, built roads, and maintained control through rapid communication, using messengers and horses along well-organized routes. The empire was divided into provinces, each with a governor who owed tribute and loyalty to the king. If there was any sign of rebellion, troops were sent swiftly and without mercy. This centralization allowed lasting control over vast and diverse territories. Among the Assyrian cities, Ashur maintained its spiritual prestige, but others such as Kalhu, Nimrud, Dur-Sharrukin, and especially Nineveh, became symbols of the empire's height. Nineveh, in particular, was transformed into a monumental metropolis by Ashurbanipal, the last great Assyrian king. There, he created the first systematized royal library in history, containing over 30,000 clay tablets recording science, religion, history, and literature, including the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. Assyrian cities were decorated with impressive reliefs, statues of gods and mythical creatures such as the Lamassu, winged bulls with human faces that guarded the gates of cities and palaces. Architecture served as propaganda. Colossal palaces, insurmountable walls, and gigantic plazas showed the people, and the enemy, that absolute strength resided there. Assyrian religion was similar to that of their Mesopotamian neighbors, but with one fundamental difference. The god Ashur was not just one among many, he was the ultimate symbol of imperial power. Ashur was not merely worshipped, he was seen as the true lord of the empire. Kings were his representatives, his armed forces. Conquering territories was fulfilling Ashur's will. War, therefore, was sacred. This link between religion and politics gave the Assyrians a sense of mission that justified expansion and brutality. By defeating other peoples, they believed they were purifying the world in the name of their god. Despite their reputation for cruelty, the Assyrians also cultivated art and knowledge. Their reliefs are masterpieces of ancient sculpture. They depict battles, royal hunts, religious rituals, and city life. Hunting, in fact, was a way to demonstrate the king's power. Lion hunts were organized as spectacles, where the monarch demonstrated his courage in the face of the beasts. In music, they used instruments such as harps, drums, and flutes. Religious ceremonies were accompanied by song and dance, reinforcing the link between earthly and divine power. And in writing, the Assyrians used the cuneiform system, inherited from the Sumerians, to record everything from diplomatic treaties to scientific, medical, and astrological texts. One of the most famous campaigns in Assyrian history was against the kingdom of Judah, led by King Hezekiah. The Assyrian army, under Sennacherib, besieged Jerusalem. However, according to biblical records and alternative accounts, the city resisted, perhaps through diplomacy or unexpected climatic factors. Even so, the episode remained a symbol of the strength and the limits of Assyrian power. Another curiosity is the use of mass deportation. The Assyrians were masters at moving entire populations to distant regions, deliberately mixing ethnicities and cultures to prevent rebellions. It was a cruel but ingenious tactic. The objective? To weaken tribal ties and strengthen submission to the throne of Nineveh. They also practiced espionage and information control. In each province, secret agents reported any strange movements to the king. Everything was monitored. The Assyrian administrative structure was, in many ways, a precursor to future empires, such as the Persian and even the Roman. Three names deserve special mention in Assyrian history: Ashurnasirpal II, Sargon II, and Ashurbanipal. Ashurnasirpal II, 9th century BC, reformed Kalhu and used terror as an official strategy. His campaigns were brutal and meticulously documented on walls and tablets. He is said to have made mounds of human heads at the gates of his conquered cities. Sargon II, 8th century BC, founded Dur-Sharrukin, a new capital planned from scratch. He expanded the empire's borders as far as Egypt, even defeating the kingdom of Israel. His death in battle shook the empire, but left an impressive legacy of organization and control. Ashurbanipal, 7th century BC, was the last great king. A ruthless conqueror and curious scholar, he collected thousands of ancient texts. It was under his reign that Assyria reached its territorial peak, but also sowed the seeds of its downfall. Despite all its military power and rigid control, the Assyrian Empire began to crumble from within. The vastness of its territory, constant rebellions, succession conflicts, and the accumulated hatred of generations of subjugated peoples created fissures that were difficult to repair. After Ashurbanipal's death, the empire plunged into chaos. Cities rebelled, vassals broke free. Taking advantage of this fragility, the Babylonians and Medes, two ancient enemies, formed a devastating alliance. In 612 BC, after years of war, The great city of Nineveh was besieged and destroyed. What remained was fire, dust, and silence. The ultimate symbol of the empire was gone forever. What was seen as invincible was reduced to ruins by those who once trembled under its shadow. The Assyrians disappeared as an empire, but their legacy lived on. They left profound marks on military organization, the art of government, the administration of empires, and even literary culture. Their library would influence generations, their war tactics would be studied for centuries, and their carved reliefs would continue to tell us stories, not of heroes, but of a people who believed that absolute power justified everything. Perhaps this is the Assyrians' greatest lesson. Fear builds swift, but fragile, empires. Power that oppresses is always the target of revenge, and those who live by the sword almost always perish by it. If you enjoyed this journey through the history of the Assyrian Empire, leave a like, share it with someone as curious as you, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters of our saga through the world's civilizations. Here, the past comes to life. Until next time.